What on earth is a sushi dog? That does not sound appealing, to me anyway. Obviously does to the people who sat in there eating a sushi dog. It is freezing cold today. It's like -1, sub-zero, 2 weeks before Christmas, and we're back out walking around the churches of the City of London. And I think this is, as I said, it's my favourite series. Probably Lost Rivers are my favourite series. Actually, they're all my favourites, but I love this series. And actually, I'm stood outside the church where it all started. This was the very first one that I did back, I think it was in autumn or summer. Actually, no, it was summer 2021. And I started my first tour of the City of London churches here. Now, to recap, there were originally 108 churches in the City of London before the Great Fire of 1666. 109 if you count St Paul's Cathedral. Various events occurred, and now today there are just 39 of those original 108 churches. Actually, does the 39 include St Paul's Cathedral? I think you get the gist though, don't you? And so far we've walked 27 of those remaining 39 churches. Obviously I'll link below to the previous videos. And also there were a number of sites where they mark the location of previous churches. So there's an update. On the walk I picked up this map here produced by the Friends of the City Churches, and it actually lists 47 churches plus Bevis Marks Synagogue. So we've got some more churches and a synagogue to add to the list. The other churches that were lost, 34 were lost in the Great Fire of 1666. Christopher Wren. So Christopher Wren is famous for restoring many of the churches that were damaged in the Great Fire. Then you had an Act of Parliament in 1860, and that did for a bunch of other churches, which seems bizarre, doesn't it, when you think that the other event, which obviously affected the churches of the city, was the Blitz. But a lot of those churches were restored, I think. And of course, you've got things like towers that are left. One of those, I think my previous city walk, we had a tower, just a remaining tower. So there's all sorts of vestiges of this kind of former ecclesiastical infrastructure of the square mile of the City of London. And as usual, I am being guided by the wonderful John Betjeman and his guide to the City of London churches, which is a little bit idiosyncratic in some ways, but I love it, and it's been a real feature of these walks. So our first church of the day is just around the corner from Liverpool Street, here on London Wall, which of course is the route of the old Roman wall around the square mile of the City of London, the old Roman city, which still defines the parameters largely, I think, of the City of London. This is All Hallows London Wall, which was rebuilt in 1765. Betjeman doesn't give a date for the original church. All he says is that the original flooring remains, or at least some of it, and it features a font from St Paul's Cathedral. Something I should say up front is that a real feature of these walks is as well that the very few of the churches will be open, even though it's a Sunday. And Betjeman also tells us that the tower is built of Portland stone, which you find all around London. It's the stone of London, although not the London stone, which we have passed on a previous walk as well. Another feature of these walks are these kind of votive offerings that are left on benches around the route. I mean, what can we take from this? Is this a leftover from Friday night's festivities? Or is it from last night's commiserations after England's defeat to France? So I'm using this map in Betjeman's book to guide us. And the next church, number 11, St Botolph Aldgate. So we'll walk straight down Houndsditch to get there. I feel like that was on the London Wall walk as well, but is that right? It's been on a previous walk, but either way, that's where we're going. Barbon Alley, one of the many fantastic little alleyways that I think of vestiges of the old medieval street plan. Who knows, they may even be vestiges of the Roman street plan, like Houndsditch here, which I will talk about very shortly. So Houndsditch was a very big, deep ditch that was dug just outside the Roman wall, by the Romans, I should say. So it was a Roman ditch, and its name is believed to derive, well, from either one of two things. It was a place where rubbish was dumped, and amongst that would have been dead dogs. Or it could also alternatively, and at the same time, be that this where feral dogs came to scavenge for food. So it was where the hounds came to feed on the rubbish thrown over the Roman wall. One of the things thrown over that Roman wall was Edric the traitor. Edric Striona he was called, and he was an alderman of Mercia who betrayed the English by joining forces with King Canute, who became the King of England. I put his dates here. I think it's something like 1016 to whatever, 1030. And eventually he must have upset Canute, because Canute had him dragged through the city by his heels, burnt with torches, decapitated, and then his body was thrown over the wall and into Houndsditch, where it was said that even the dogs wouldn't feed on his body. So here is St Botolph Aldgate, where the city meets the East End. And Betjeman remarks that it is very much an East End church, and was busy in his day when he wrote the book. There was a youth club in the crypt, and it was basically a mission to the poor of the East End. I think it still sees itself as sitting in that sort of gap, a transformative zone which would have been the eastern gate of the Roman wall. It would have been the eastern entrance to the old Roman city of London, and apparently it was where there was a Roman cemetery. It's said there's been a church here since at least 1125, and with a possible earlier Saxon church. The church was expanded in the 15th century, and actually it escaped the Great Fire and was largely unharmed in the Blitz. This particular church, though, was built in 1741, because the old 15th century church had become sort of dilapidated, so it had to be rebuilt. Amongst the most sort of interesting features that Betjeman mentions, but it isn't on their website, is that there is a mummified head somewhere in this church that is said to be the head of the father of Lady Jane Grey. But yeah, the church don't mention that on their website. They do mention, though, that there is a plaque on the floor there that commemorates the longest night of the Blitz in 1941. I can't find it in any of the notes about St Botolph, but I remember when I first came to the city here as a student when I was 18, I read about a church that had a very radical vicar. I think it must have been in the 20s and 30s, when, of course, this was, you know, a lot of hardship in the East End then. There was a lot of trade unionism, there was a lot of anti-Semitism, and there was a lot of organising to protect various communities in there. There was a lot going on, and that the vicar here, I think, was a communist who flew a red flag from the spire of the church. I may have the wrong church, but I seem to remember, because I used to get the coach in the first couple of weeks when I came here as a student before I got a house in Forest Gate. I'd get off the coach up there at Moorgate and I'd walk this way, and I'm pretty sure it's the church I used to walk past on my way to uni, or City Poly as it was then. But I could have it completely wrong. I'm pretty sure someone will correct me in the comments below. But this feels like the right place. So now we're going to go down Aldgate High Street and then to St Katherine Cree, now our third church of the day. And you can imagine what it must have been like in the old City of London before the Great Fire, when there were 108 or 109 churches packed into the square mile, and what a massive effect that would have had on the infrastructure of the City of London, of its sounds as well. Imagine when the bells rang out, when there were 108 or 109, if you include St Paul's, churches packed into that square mile. It would have been incredible. This is Leadenhall Street. So this is the church of St Katherine Cree on Cree Church Lane. The tower here, the stone tower, is Tudor. I think it dates from 1504, but the rest of the church was rebuilt between 1628 and 1631, and it escaped both the Great Fire and the Blitz. It's a shame we can't go inside because apparently it looks like there's some really beautiful features, including a Catherine wheel stained glass window. But it's a magnificent, Tudor church essentially. The original church dates back to the 13th century. So next we go to St Olave Hart Street. Churches like St Katharine's actually are some of my favourite of the city churches, where you just see these little vestiges of the old medieval city just woven into the fabric of the contemporary city, and they just sat there and people are walking past and not really necessarily always realising what they're walking through. I mean, because we've got the Lloyd's building here, you've got, I think that's the cheese, what they call the cheese grater. They're all given nicknames now, aren't they? But once upon a time when there was just like the gherkin, now there's so many of them going up. They're going to run out of silly names for them, aren't they? So these are little pieces of the old fabric of the city, like the bits of fragments of London Wall, Roman Wall, which there are still quite a few. It's so important to kind of connect us to the origins of the city of London, why all of this glass and steel is even here today. So here in Mark Lane is all that remains of All Hallows Staining. This tower here dates from 1320. It's not the original church on the site, but it survived the Great Fire, and then it collapsed 5 years later. I think it's believed because they thought there was possibly too many burials in the churchyard that must have undermined the foundations of the church, and the rest of it collapsed. But this tower has survived since then, all the time since 1320, even though a couple of large bombs fell on this site. I'm running beside All Hallows. You've got the wonderful Star Alley. I love this little alleyway here. It's one of my favourite city alleyways. Just a little down the road from All Hallows Staining we have St Olave Hart Street, which looks to be quite an interesting and quite original looking church. Here we have the rather ornate Ship pub just beside the church. I don't think I've ever been in there. I don't think I've even noticed it before. Any good? Someone will definitely know this pub and be able to tell us whether it's any good or not. This is St Olave Hart Street, which is a pre-Great Fire church. Betjeman doesn't give a date. See if I can find one and put it on the screen here. He describes it as a country church in the world of Mincing Lane, made of ragstone, I guess, must be Kentish ragstone. Now there is a service on in there at the moment, but the door seems to be shut, so whether this is just like a rehearsal for a Christmas service and it's a closed thing. I'm going to try and get inside though. Perhaps I was using the wrong door. There's a really pretty little churchyard here. It's just a shame that it's too dark to come out on the camera, but hopefully you get a sense of this peaceful little oasis in the city. So this is All Hallows by the tower. That has a remarkable crypt. There are parts of this church which predate the Great Fire. But in the crypt there's tessellated pavement believed to date from AD 45, very early, and also the remains of a Saxon church. So it looks as if it's open. I hope we can get inside. Down to the crypt. So this is a section of Roman terracotta tesserae, which was the floor of a Roman dwelling. Isn't that remarkable? Apparently one of the best preserved bits of Roman flooring in the whole of the city. This is great. This is a model of Roman London. And that river there, where you can see numbers 4 and 12, that's the Walbrook, where the Temple of Mithras was. And just over here, you have the Fleet, which ran down the western side of the city. This is fantastic. So this is a piece of Saxon stonework that was found. Again, by chance, it was embedded in the foundations of the St Clair Chapel.
This is the wheelhead cross, which is the upper piece of a large carved stone cross found by chance under the nave of the church in 1951. It's dated to 900 AD and bears the inscription in Anglo-Saxon, Thelvar had this stone set up over here.
Thank you to, I think it was Chris, who left a note telling me about the crypt here and some of the remains in there. So that was incredible to go in there. So that was a really beautiful end to this walk around the latest instalment of my tour of the City of London churches, the churches of the City of London. And what an amazing day it was. Freezing cold, of course. So it was really lovely to be able to actually go into St Olaf's whilst there was a service going on. And I just sort of snuck in at the back, and it was really lovely. They were singing Christmas carols, and it was really warm in there. And it was, but one of the most beautifully English things happened is that right at the end, when when the vicar was doing the blessing, someone turned on the tea urn at the back, so we could hear at this very solemn moment was this kind of like the heating of the of the tea urn, because, you know, let's be honest, that is the most important thing to English people. What a brilliant ending to this walk. This is, I think, in some ways, this has been the most special one because of those two occurrences. Take care, keep well, stay safe, and as I always like to say, I look forward to seeing you on the next walk, wherever that may be. I have no idea, I really don't. Just hope it's a little bit above zero would be nice.